Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell and I talked to Ryne Hager of Android Police about Google's decision to add its Privacy Sandbox to Android. We really dig in and kind of explain what's going on there, what we can expect in the future, and why things aren't as cut and clear as Apple's own version of this ad tracking privacy. Then we talk to Harris all about Bionic eyes and how the obsolescence of the companies leads to folks not being able to use these devices anymore. We round things out with our stories of the week. First, I talk about the DOJ adding a new team, the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, and then we talk about printers. And yes, it's just as grim as you expect. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 222, recorded Thursday, February 17th, 2022. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Podium. Join more than 100,000 businesses that already use Podium to streamline their customer interactions. Get started for free at podium.com/twit or sign up for a paid Podium account and get a free credit card reader. Restrictions apply.
And by HackerRank, it's time to reboot your technical interviews with HackerRank's easy-to-use tools. With a pre-made question library, code playback, and built-in whiteboard, you'll be conducting better technical interviews and instantly identifying the right talent. Go to hackerrank.com/TNW to start a better tech interview for free today.
And by Nureva. Traditional audio conferencing systems can entail lots of components, installation can take days, and you might not get the mic coverage you need. That's complex expensive. But Nureva Audio is easy to install and manage, no technicians required, and you get true full room coverage. That's easy economical. Learn more at nureva.com.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other guy, Jason Howell. And I noticed as I was doing the date today, it's almost like all twos, right? It's February, it's 2022. It's episode 222. If this show was on Tuesdays, yeah, if this show was on Tuesday, like we need to swap all about Android and Tech News Weekly, if only for this one time. Maybe next week we can do that. Probably not going to happen, but there we go.
Not going to happen, but it's a thought.
That'd be amazing.
We have some great stuff planned for you today. I'm kicking off the first interview here to talk about a change coming to Android that may surprise you. Watch what happens next. We are joined today by Android Police's Ryne Hager, who is here to talk to us about a change in privacy coming to Android. Welcome to the show, Ryne.
Thank you for having me, Mikah. It's nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you as well, and good to chat with you. So let's kick things off by talking about Google's Privacy Sandbox. One of the first things that you note in your piece is that it's coming to Android from Chrome. So tell us about its current existence in Chrome, how it works there, before we kind of dig into what it could look like in Android.
So Privacy Sandbox in Chrome is part of Google's recent initiatives to sort of decouple how deep advertising ties into tracking. As you know, some of the name implies, it's all about respecting customer privacy. And as you mentioned, it originated on Chrome, and it's sort of bleeding over now into Android itself under the same sort of name, the same marketing. It's not going to be exactly the same. There's a difference between, how cookies work on the web and how ad tracking works in mobile apps. But it's a similar approach in terms of adjusting how customers are being tracked to better ensure their privacy. But it's not exactly the same as the Privacy Sandbox that we might be familiar with from the web.
Now, how does it actually work on Chrome? How does the current Privacy Sandbox work? What does it protect you from? What's being sandboxed on the web if I'm using Chrome and I sort of enable this feature?
Well, the last that I had heard, and I haven't been following it as closely as I'd like to, because last year when they announced it, or 2 years ago when they announced it, it was still sort of a high level soliciting developer feedback and trying to determine exactly what sort of changes would be best for developers so that customer privacy can be respected while ensuring that they don't overstep their bounds or eliminate the sort of things that developers might actually need or ad providers might need that they can, just change to doing in a more privacy respecting way. But
this makes sense. This is So folks can kind of learn more about the Privacy Sandbox. Chrome developers page has a lot of information about it, and yes, it's more of kind of a proposals and a set of suggestions that the folks can kind of follow. And then underneath kind of that overall look of things, they've got the Topics API, which we've talked about on this show before, and what was originally Flock, and kind of those changes that have taken place. And so this is an interesting thing.
So much of it has shifted recently. It's hard to keep track of because Flock died. Exactly. That's why I'm not quite sure where things stand right now. But I do know that they're trying to decouple from the direct sort of cookie-based tracking and that super granular approach and scaling things back.
Absolutely. So then let's talk about a future where this feature exists on Android. So you mentioned in the piece, and I think a lot of people have talked about the fact that Apple has a set of tools, the app tracking transparency, which is at its face, it's an option where when I launch an app on my iPhone, if that app wants to track me, then it needs to pop up a prompt that says, yes, I will allow you to track me, or no, I will not allow you to track me. And then it is up to kind of the app and the ways that it goes about sort of making use of that prompt and what that means. And I think that's where things get interesting. But do we know anything about what this could look like on Android in particular? Are we going to see prompts like this, or is this going to be kind of more of this sort of, here are some suggestions for what you should do? What's kind of does this have teeth, I guess, is the question.
So Google's been a little nebulous in terms of describing exactly how all of this is going to work. And I think that's intentional. They don't want to scare developers too early because Apple's shift resulted in pretty substantial change. It was opt-in rather than an opt-out process. By getting this big prompt, right at the when you fire up the app at the very beginning, most users are going to click no. Like, of course, I don't want to be tracked, right? Well, the recent studies indicate that there's been something like a 20 to 15% drop in advertising revenue for at least some applications on iOS as a result of this change because so many more users opt out. So I know a lot of Facebook's recent financial troubles have been attributed to this as well. And I don't think that Google is going to take the same approach, but they haven't really documented exactly how this change is going to work yet, in large part because, like with Privacy Sandbox on the web, this is the start of a conversation. They want to talk to developers. They have a handful of ideas. They know they want to do certain APIs. They want to have advertisers shift to less granular models of tracking, things like the Topics API and sort of Flock adjacent, less invasive methods of following people, but nothing is set in stone yet.
Mm-hmm. Now, what has anyone kind of jumped on board with this? Have there been any developers who've said, oh yeah, this would be a good idea. This is something that we're willing to kind of play ball with? And I ask that because of the response, the reaction that we got from developers when Apple made these changes. And as you mentioned earlier, there had been a sort of cited drop in ad revenue. Is anyone going, you know what? No, we're not about this. Or is anyone going, you know what? Yes, we can make this happen. What's been the reaction thus far?
So in point of fact, a handful of high-profile developers did jump on board saying they were supportive of this decision. It's barely a decision. This is just a conversation that's starting. Though do note, Google says whatever changes are going to happen will be enforced within 2 years. Change is coming. We just don't know exactly what shape it'll take. But Activision, Blizzard, a couple of other game developers, Rovio, I think, were on board with the change. Curiously enough, and drawing the connection directly to something we just talked about, Facebook is on board with the change, and that's sort of the endorsement you don't want. Graham Mudd, business, who does something in business products at Facebook, tweeted the other day that he was looking forward to the dialogue and the change, and that for me, like, I thought the idea of a dialogue was a good idea until I saw Facebook is in favor of this, and that's not a good sign necessarily.
Yeah, that would kind of, because of the way that Facebook responded to Apple's app tracking transparency. And we saw I think now it's been 2 earnings calls where Facebook blamed Apple for it losing some of its money. And we've seen other companies do that. So for a company who seems to be paying a lot of attention to app tracking transparency type tools being an issue for them, to be on board with this is interesting. But I'm curious, do you think that part of it is because of the way that Google is handling this? I mean, your piece is entitled, Google doesn't want to pull an Apple with new ad tracking changes for Android. What does it mean to pull an Apple? And by Google not pulling an Apple, are they better kind of working with the industry to make change happen while kind of trying to make everyone happy?
So that's sort of a 2-part question. Pulling an Apple, I sort of just mean like forcing a sudden and drastic change without regards to the market, which is a very Apple thing to do. You were the dictator, you're in charge, here's your walled garden, and you rule, you make the decisions within it. Google can't act in the same sort of way for a handful of different reasons. One of them is there's just an inherent difference in the app markets. So the Play Store and Android as a result depend very heavily on ad-subsidized models. Part of that has to do with its prevalence in emerging markets. Android's much more successful in places that are, just starting to grow when it comes to the smartphone market. But those markets also don't spend as much money on apps. So the ad-subsidized model is a firm requirement there for success, and that's part of why Android succeeds. But because of that, Google can't just come in and be like, hey, we're going to take away 20% of your revenue in like 6 months because of this change we're just going to make that allows anyone to opt out of ad targeting. They want to do something that's more of a slow transition, something that allows the markets that they rely on for growth and the markets that depend on Android to adapt to the change a little more slowly. And some of the stuff they talked about during the call was the more familiar Privacy Sandbox stuff, topics API changes, general API changes, trying to force ad providers into using a specific set of more privacy-respectful APIs. Again, all of this is undocumented. We don't even know what sort of shape any of this would take yet or what kind of enforcement is going to happen. But that's what I mean when I say they don't want to pull an Apple, is they're trying to silo change a little more slowly in a way that developers can anticipate, that emerging markets won't get disrupted by, that sort of thing.
Understood. Now, some would say that Google switching from Flock to Topics is a bit of a sort of a full-on faux pas, meaning that in the way that we've seen Google kind of behave in the past, where they release a thing, they announce a thing, and then they end up no longer supporting it. Rest in peace, Google Reader, for example, as well as any number of messaging apps. That is what this is. But I think that it could also be argued that this is simply the company truly putting its money where its mouth is when it says, hey, we're going to listen to feedback. We're working directly in a collaborative effort to come up with a solution. And so Flock changed to Topics because of what people said. I'm curious about your perspective as a person who pays such close attention to Android and to Google. Do you think that it was a faux pas, like they were full on with Flock and they were going to release it? Or do you think that Topics was the natural evolution and that we'll continue to kind of see this, that Android or that Google itself truly is, not being hypocritical and is saying, we will do what we say we're going to do, and we're going to work back and forth on a collaborative approach to ad tracking?
I definitely think it's more of a collaborative approach. I don't think that standards are products necessarily. Killing Google Inbox, the travesty that action isn't on the same scale. Yeah, but it isn't on the same scale as like being like, oh, this particular standard, this implementation, we're not going to do this one, we're going to do this other one. Like we said, this is a dialogue still. They're trying to get feedback from developers, both in the web space, security researchers, mobile app developers. They want to make sure that this is something that doesn't disrupt their business while also ensuring that it does respect customer privacy. So it is a dialogue. I personally think some of the pushback against Flock wasn't merited. I thought the standard was fine. I know a lot of people disagreed. Something like that is going to happen. Topics isn't that different from it. We're going to end up with some system, some model that resembles it. Any of them are probably going to be fine, especially once researchers and the developer community has selected one, had time to test it, seen what its issues are. I'm not particularly concerned, and I don't think it really represents a lack of willingness to follow through on Google's part.
Understood. Well, Ryne Hager, I want to thank you so much for taking some time with us today to talk about this, to talk through this. It'll be interesting to see this collaborative approach go forward. We will include a link in the show notes to privacysandbox.com, which is the place where you can learn more about Google's whole approach to the Privacy Sandbox, its proposals and everything that goes forward. Of course, folks can head to Android Police if they want to follow you online. Is there anywhere else they should go to check out your work and follow you?
They can also check me out on Twitter. I'm at Ryne Hager, RYNEHAGER, because I spell my name funny. And that's about it.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Up next, what happens when a technology implant that actually gives blind people a sort of sight stops being supported? It's kind of like taking my phone isn't getting updates anymore and taking it to the next level. Crazy stuff. We're going to talk about that. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Podium. If you own a business, you already know that like your time is taxed, right? There are never enough hours in the day to waste doing things like playing phone tag, just as one example. A list of customers that you need to reach doesn't get any shorter, of course, especially when business is good, and that's what you want. That's why local businesses everywhere turn to Podium. Podium makes every interaction as easy as sending a text. So everything that makes your business great can actually get done a whole lot faster. Podium isn't just a better way to communicate, it's a better way to do everything. So you can gather reviews, you can collect payments, even marketing to your customers. Podium makes all of it super easy and basically as easy as just pressing send. You're not just going to be freeing up more time. You're going to be growing your business and getting more done. With Podium, you'll close deals with customers before the competition even has a chance to call them back. I mean, it's amazing, right? Like as a customer, you leave a store. Leo always talks about this, right? Like went to an ice cream shop and he leaves the shop and he gets this coupon, or he wakes up and he gets a coupon for 20% off. That's super effective when it comes in through SMS. Incredibly effective. You're going to go in, you're going to use that coupon. So join more than 100,000 businesses that already use Podium to streamline their customer interactions. Get started for free at podium.com/twit. Or you can actually sign up for a paid Podium account and get a free credit card reader. Restrictions do apply. That's podium.com/twit. And we thank Podium for their support of Tech News Weekly. As we continue to just grow our collective reliance on technology, right? It's not going anywhere. Certain challenges are likely to crop up in ways often that are very unexpected. For example, what happens when someone's health relies on a technology that's suddenly unsupported by a manufacturer? It's taking this technology is not supported anymore that we're used to seeing with our phones, let's say, and updates and everything, and applying it to something much more critical. Well, joining us to talk about this is Mark Harris. He's the co-author of a piece on IEEE Spectrum that he actually co-wrote along with Eliza Strickland called "Their Bionic Eyes Are Now Obsolete and Unsupported." And that headline, I will admit, was awesome. It caught my attention, and this piece was amazing. So welcome to the show, Mark. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jason. I'm very excited to be with you today. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to get you here. And I think this topic is super important, right? Because so many times we think of technology as this saving grace. It's going to save everything. You know, we've heard about like, implants, which we're going to talk about, technology being the saving force for health. And the reality is technology, as we know, is not a permanent thing. It doesn't last forever. And that's really what the kind of the crux of this article is all about. So let's dive into it. Beginning with the technology, it's called Second Sight, or at least the company, and I assume the product is called Second Sight. What can you tell us about this product to begin with? When was it created? Who was it serving up until recently?
Yeah, right. So actually the product is called Argus, Argus, and it was developed by the company is called Second Sight. And in the late 90s, they came up with this idea. Neurosurgeons and optical surgeons had noticed several times that when electrodes were placed on people's retinas, that person saw a flash of light. They perceived a flash of light. It wasn't like vision, but even blind people would get a flash or like a pow in their visual field. And one of the neurosurgeons and optical surgeons who was working on this, a guy called Robert Greenberg, thought, well, just a second, if you can do one flash of light in one place, you could do multiple flashes of light and kind of build up pixels, just like images or our computer screens are built up with pixels. You could build up an image for someone to see. And so that's really where the idea of the company came from. And it took them a long time to develop it. The company span out in 1998, and it wasn't until 2013 that this Argus device was first approved by regulators here in the US and then later in Europe. So it took a long time to make, right? These things take a long time to develop. And basically the idea is the user would wear a pair of glasses, and these are normal glass spectacles, but the spectacles would have a camera in. They would take an image, just like a just like the Snap spectacles that we've heard of. They would send that image down to a little visual processing unit, which would turn the signal, kind of make it drastically lower resolution. And then that signal would be beamed to a tiny array of electrodes implanted on someone's retina at the back of their eye. And those retina would then would be stimulated, tiny little, electric stimulations of the retina to build up this image in the blind person's eye. It's an amazing concept, right? And it sounds like something that's in the future and not actually in the past, because it was, being developed, been around for 10 years now. It was only applicable to a certain number of people, quite a small population of blind people. Obviously, there are many conditions that can affect people's vision. This was a certain family of conditions called retinitis pigmentosa, and it was basically a decay of some of the cells in the retina, kind of genetic conditions that could mean that people gradually went blind. And so the idea was, and what they actually did was implant this Argus device with the glasses and the processing unit separate, into a number of people. And they actually had over 350 people around the world had the Argus device implanted. So, and many of those people had great results. Many of those people were able to have some kind of visual perception, right? It's not like vision. It's not even like a blurry vision. It's even hard to imagine. It's more just like flashes of light that they gradually learned to associate with things in the real world. So they could see things like bright lights, perhaps, or they could the people who had the best response to it could even perceive things like a sidewalk, the black and white stripes. So high contrast, bright things that they could start to somehow get a sense of. Many people, or some people, didn't get any response at all and stopped using the device. It just didn't click with them for whatever reason. But there were a big group of people who were actually, using these devices for a number of years.
Yeah, and I can only imagine, right? Because I'm lacking my sight, but I can imagine some information is better than no information, even if it's low res, high contrast, something very limited. Something to pull from is better than not having anything. Of course, not everybody agreed. Obviously, like you said, not everybody continued to use it. The thing that troubles me about this is, like, it would be one thing if it was like a pair of glasses and we just put a pair of glasses on and it does this thing, but it actually involves the implant, right? That retinal implant. So this is technology that exists inside of the body. It's been surgically implanted to the retina. So that's no small task, which really kind of takes that problem of obsolescence that we're used to hearing about other technologies to a completely different level. What happens to, in this case, the company is now is it on the verge of bankruptcy, or they are bankrupt and the company's going away? If anything, this product is not going to be supported. What happens to the implants and who pays for that? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, let's talk about the company itself. So, the company, made all these implants, and then in 2019, they realized that the number of people with this group of conditions, these retinitis pigmentosa conditions, wasn't that big, right? It wasn't going to scale to the point where they could build these things cheaply and, get them off an assembly line kind of thing and really start making money out of it. So they decided to pivot to a brain implant, right? So bypassing the optic nerve altogether and instead stimulating, using the same glasses and the same processing unit, but stimulating the brain directly. And if you stimulate the brain directly, obviously, you can imagine that actually opens up the market to way more people with visual issues, people whose blindness is caused by physical damage to the eye, for instance, but their brain is still intact. And so that was their pivot, and they didn't. At that point, they said, right, well, we're no longer going to develop the Argus system. The Argus users had been promised things like color vision or face recognition or other kind of high-tech software-y things that you can imagine, developing if you have this user base. And they had been assured that those were going to happen. Well, those upgrades, the company said, we're no longer going to do that. We're going to work on this brain implant instead. But don't worry, we're going to keep supporting you. We've got accessories. We'll keep giving you support. We'll keep giving you care. There's nothing to worry about. Well, sadly, that wasn't the case. The pandemic hit. The company, just absolutely ran out of money in early 2020. And, they basically shut the doors, laid off all their staff, sold everything. I mean, everything down to the shelves, everything down to the laptops. This was a company that could no longer develop anything because it didn't have any people, or it had few people. It didn't have any of that sort of lab equipment to actually move forward. And at that point, it was very clear to the users of the Argus that they were that they felt like they were on their own, right? The people at Second Sight weren't picking up the phone; they weren't responding to queries, and people with these devices, they still are living the rest of their lives. So it does happen that people, their glasses break, just like we all sit on our spectacles. The unit fails, or they have other health issues. Other health issues, particularly those involving the head, can be quite serious because Second Sight said, well, we really it's very important to be careful before you have any MRI scans, big magnetic resonant imagery scans, because there's the possibility of dangerous interactions with the implant that you have in your eye. It could heat up, for instance. So, it was at that point when they suddenly realized that the promises of support, the promises of not having a more advanced device, that's one thing, those fall through. But when they can't actually get support for their day-to-day lives, when they can't continue to enjoy what they've got, or they can't move forward in their lives in other ways, then that was a big blow. That was a big blow to the user base.
Yeah, it really just kind of stings, especially when we consider, like again, I can't imagine not having the ability to see, right? I've lived my entire life with the ability to see, but living a life where you can't, and then suddenly you have this technology that gives you some sort of access to this sensory that you didn't have before. Like, it has to be heartbreaking to have that technology and then recognize, oh, wait a minute. Like, it's almost like you're going to be incredibly careful with the technology that you still have if you weren't already, but really careful now, because the second something happens to it, that perception goes away completely. But that implant doesn't go away, right? Or are people getting them removed? What's the plan there?
Well, what's the plan? There is no plan, right?
People shared what they plan to do.
The sad thing is there's no plan. So that's right. So when I talk to people and ask them how they used it, some of them were saying, right, well, I'm going to just live my life with it, and whatever happens, happens. I'm going to keep using it as much as I can. And others were like, well, you know what? I'm just going to eke it out a bit. I'm going to turn it on this day and then perhaps turn it off when I don't need it that much. And so kind of trying to make it last for as long as possible, like we do with a favorite shirt that we want to last for as long as possible. You only get it out on special occasions. But to do that for a sense is quite a big change, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so exactly how do you deal with that? There is always the option of getting it explanted, right? Which is exactly what it sounds like. It's the opposite of having it implanted. It's having it removed surgically. Some of the people with these conditions are getting older. Right? The last thing they want is another surgery. And they're kind of, taking that. It is a bit of a gamble. You have to make a gamble. Will I need an MRI on my head in the years to come? If I do, I should get it explanted now. And then, although I didn't hear this from people, I often think there's also the possibility of like, well, if I leave it in there, maybe there's a way they can reactivate it. Maybe there's a way they can remotely fix it in the future. So that's something I guess I'll be interested to hear more as I talk to more of these patients.
Maybe hobbyists will fly in and save the day, which I don't know that you necessarily want that with a health technology, but I'm just saying you never know with technology.
Well, so one of the users, his implant in his eye was working fine, his glasses were working fine, but the processing unit that he wore on a belt fell and broke, right? Just can happen. We all drop our phones, and it fell and broke. And he was like, I'm not going to give up. I am not going to let this stop me using this device. And so what he did was talk to other users around Europe. So this guy was based in Europe, and he talked to other people in the user base, both to the doctors who had installed it. The doctors, of course, are quite separate from the company that developed it. So the doctors are still around, of course, and still doing great work with their patients, as much as they can without having access to the factory stuff. So the doctors are still there, and he just said, look, do you have any spare parts? And so what he actually managed to do was cobble together a system with the spare parts, perhaps, I think, from one patient who was no longer using the device because it was no longer working for them. And from one doctor who said, yeah, look, I've got a bit left over. Maybe, who knows what that was. Maybe it was one that, another part of the system broke during installation. They had some spare parts and he got it working again. And I think that's just a great, it shows the length to which people will go to preserve whatever experiences they are having with these bionic eyes, and to keep it going, and to keep their participation alive.
Yeah, and this is just one example of this. Some of the questions that I have, have to do with kind of regulation around health technology like this. Like it's one thing to have a phone that's suddenly not supported, right? And I suppose to a certain degree we've kind of accepted that at a certain point our phones will become obsolete. They don't get updated anymore. They run really slow, and we can just always turn and buy another phone. And the unfortunate thing is, unless it's recycled, it ends up in a landfill and whatever. But when it's a health technology, it just seems like the circumstances are a lot graver, like if something fails. And I just wonder if, creators of health devices like this, might need a higher standard to live up to, or if there are regulations in place to protect patients and consumers. Are you aware of anything along those lines?
Well, right, before a device is allowed to be sold to the public, before it is licensed by someone like the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the US, and similar agencies around the world, they have to show that it's going to last, it's going to be safe and effective. And part of that is showing that it's going to last for a decent amount of time. And part of that is also having an exit strategy of, where it's appropriate, right? It's difficult, right? We don't expect, if you have an artificial shoulder joint put in, you know that if that fails, for whatever reason, you're going to have to get it taken out and put back in again. The digital side of things does make it different because there are so many more failure modes than like a joint or, a filling, right? We all aware that we have to have fillings taken out and put back in our mouth, all the time. There is something different about this. And there is talk of, and typically, and if you have a pacemaker or another implant like that, that will be provided typically by a large organization, one of these huge, medical device. And the expectation would be if that one failed, yes, you would have to take it out, but they could put another one in, right? And that one might be a bit better than the one you had before. It's a terrible inconvenience, but that is part and parcel of having things inside your body. The real issue, of course, the particularly harsh issue is when the company fails. No one else has got that expertise. The expertise has basically vanished into the ether with all those staff who have moved to different jobs. They can't be expected to be pulled back, and forced. It's a complex situation. So there are talk of medical continuity bills or some way where everyone pays into a fund that can pay out to help people like this, like we do with uninsured drivers. So there are ideas around this, and there are also ideas around standardization, right? If something that goes into the body could have a standard communications protocol or a standard power protocol, just like a USB plug, or wireless systems, for talking. If we could start to standardize those, then that would reduce the issues, right? Perhaps you might not be able to change the electrode, the very proprietary bit that this company's made. But if the power unit fails, at least you could swap it out from a power unit from another company. Or if the communication, the data communication, you could swap it out with another company. So there are ways where you can imagine that these technologies can start to move towards standardization. But it's really hard in the case of this bionic eye. I mean, this is the first bionic eye, right? I mean, there are people working on something similarly. Perhaps that should be the standard. But then, they started developing this in the mid-2000s. Technology has moved on a long way from there. And so devices take so long to get from an idea. I think that the guy had the idea in 1991. He started the company in 1990. So we're talking about, before there were smartphones, before there were even decent laptops, it was a whole generation, or it's like 10 generations in technology terms. So it's a real problem, and it's going to become more of a problem as more of the companies that were made 10 years ago are starting to come, thinking about coming to market as well. So it's going to be a growing issue. And then, of course, that's even without considering companies that are talking about not necessarily medically essential implants. Obviously, I'm thinking about things here like Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, that is talking about, it's talking about, initially devices to help people with neurological issues or neurological problems. But he's also talking about, that superhuman, ability, brain-computer interfaces where we start jacking into our laptops and jacking into the internet directly. So if you're talking about that obviously that scales the issue to, much more, enormously compared to the people who might need it medically. It's a really complex issue. And I think stories like this can only, I think seeing the lived experience of people who have gone through this should be a cautionary eye opener to people who are developing these technologies now and getting very excited about the technology they're working on now. And perhaps, obviously that no one wants to think about when their company fails or what happens to the end of life of either their company or their products, but they really should be, and they should be thinking about that really from day one.
Yeah, indeed. It's incredibly important to understand the human impact of something like this happening. And I think your article does a really great job of illustrating that. So thank you so much for walking through that with us. Mark Harris, of course, writes for IEEE Spectrum. And if people want to follow the rest of your work online, where can they do so?
They can. I always put stuff on my Twitter account, which is at M.E. Harris, at me Harris. And they should also follow my co-author, Eliza, whose Twitter handle is at Newsbeagle, which is such a great handle. I wish I got there first.
Yeah, I love it. Right on. Well, you guys did great work here. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about it today. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It's been fun.
You bet. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, up next, the Department of Justice is paying a little more attention to cryptocurrency. More on that in a moment. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by HackerRank. Between deadlines and frustrating interview tools that aren't set up for technical interviews, conducting a tech interview might be the last thing you have time for. Well, You have to spend the first 10 minutes of your interview just trying to set up an environment to share code from a dozen documents. And of course, this wastes you and your candidate's time. Fortunately, HackerRank has developed an IDE, an integrated development environment just for the tech interview process. With a set of easy-to-use interview tools, you'll quickly find the best developers for your technical projects. The developer interview tools include a pre-made question library with more than 2,500 questions, so you'll quickly find the right questions for your specific coding needs. There's also a code playback feature that lets you review the candidate's coding approach and score their skill levels. You can watch how they're coding and learn more about them. And a built-in whiteboard so you can collaborate in real time to see how problems are solved. It's time to reboot, yes, reboot, refresh your technical interview process with HackerRank. Click, interview, done. Start using HackerRank for free today and see how much better a technical interview can be. It's time to reboot your technical interviews with HackerRank's easy-to-use tools. With a pre-made question library, code playback, and built-in whiteboard, you'll be conducting better technical interviews and instantly identifying the right talent. Go to hackerrank.com/TNW to start a better tech interview for free today. That's hackerrank.com/TNW. Check it out. Thank you, HackerRank, for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right. My story of the week is about the Department of Justice, which is lending credence to the sort of viability, I think, of cryptocurrencies. I think anything that requires a focused team within the Department of Justice, that tells you that there's definitely something there, or that at least the government sees that there's something there. There's something to it, as much as I kind of wish that that wasn't the case. The Justice Department has hired a veteran cybersecurity prosecutor to lead a team whose job it is to this is quote, identify and dismantle the misuse of cryptocurrencies and other digital assets. They are paying close attention now to this change in the way that money and in some cases property are exchanged. The Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, had this to say: if we're going to see, as I think we will, cryptocurrency gaining more traction and gaining wider adoption, we've got to make sure that the ecosystem that they operate in can be trusted and, frankly, can be policed. We're going to make it our business to go after them and get those proceeds back and make it clear to them that they can't hide. Bloomberg says this is a $2 trillion market. That's what cryptocurrencies currently account for. And as I believe it was just my story last week, we know that it's possible for fraud to take place in cryptocurrency. Some would argue, myself included, that cryptocurrency itself is just a huge whopping ball of fraud. But in the space where people have chosen to ascribe value to this funny money, you do have people who are trying to take advantage of it. And like we saw with the husband and wife duo, who basically it was like $3.4 billion or something like that if the money was turned into actual money from funny money. And so it's clear that there is a possibility to make quite a bit of money illegally using cryptocurrencies. And at one point, that was kind of the main use of cryptocurrency, was the ability to exchange goods and services in a way that wasn't traceable. Again, in the Bloomberg article, it says illicit transactions jumped almost 80% to $14 billion in 2021. This is according to blockchain analytics firm Chainalysis. But it says crime made up a much smaller share of total crypto transaction volume, which increased drastically last year. So because of the increased popularity of cryptocurrency, more legitimate means of exchange were taking place, but they are looking at illegal activity on virtual currency exchanges, cryptocurrency tumbler or mixing services. And the way that those work is that you put in your funny money and then it turns your funny money into other forms of funny money so that you can basically untrack or make less traceable your funds. And we saw this as well whenever we talked, the story that I talked about last week, where they had turned what was probably, Bitcoin or Ethereum into some other forms of funny money in order to make it so that you couldn't quite tell what the money was originally, where it was coming from. So this is going to be interesting to see. The person who's now in charge said we're trying to centralize so that we're a one-stop shop of all the subject matter experts within the department. So it sounds like the Department of Justice had several different cryptocurrency experts who were just kind of like getting together to make things happen. But now they have a team where they can make sure that they've got their crypto team who's focused on this specifically. So I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of what changes happen going forward, what kind of cases we start to see going forward. But I'm curious, Jason, do you think that, does it make sense for the company, for the Department of Justice to implement this team because we are at the point where you can no longer kind of ignore cryptocurrency? Or do you feel like this is jumping the gun a little bit, that cryptocurrency could fade out? And so having a team almost lends a certain level of legitimacy to something that is not necessarily, quote unquote, a thing. I'm curious where you stand on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is coming off the heels of the Super Bowl last weekend, which a lot of people called the crypto bowl because like half of the advertising was cryptocurrency, related or blockchain related. And was it Coinbase had the bouncing QR code, and they had an insane amount of interest because of that ad. I believe that we're kind of at a point to where cryptocurrency, whether it's understood is one question. I don't know that even people who are putting money into it. And by the way, I should, full disclosure, I do have some investment in crypto, very small, but it's just kind of like to understand how it works, right? And I don't even understand exactly how it works. I'm doing it purely just out of interest to kind of see what happens and to really get a better sense of it. And I think I'm not alone. There's a lot of people who keep hearing about cryptocurrency, who keep hearing about blockchain and all these things, who keep hearing the stories about either people making a ton of money or losing a ton of money. So obviously people hopefully understand that it's incredibly volatile and, it's basically gambling. But I mean, yeah, I think the Super Bowl is kind of a really great example of this, the fact that there is a certain mainstream awareness around cryptocurrency right now. And ultimately what that means is it's going from the hands and positions of people who for the last 10, 11, 12 years have been, putting all of their attention on cryptocurrency as the next big thing, kind of making it happen, into this space where whether it's going to happen or not, when whatever happen is, you can define, but whether it is or not, there's a lot of people who know nothing about the technology who are willing to put a little bit of money into it just to see what happens. And when you get to that point, you have the potential for a lot of people to lose a lot of money. And so I'm not surprised at all to see this, that the Department of Justice is getting involved in this. I think it is kind of an inflection point for cryptocurrency, regardless of how the cryptocurrency market is doing right now. Because when you take a look at Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies, they're definitely down from their highs of not even a couple of months ago. And like I said, it's incredibly volatile. So it's not even that like cryptocurrency is on fire right now and the values are as high as they've ever been. And now there's a big risk for people to lose money. This is almost the more dangerous point because people recognize that there is a dip, and that, now's the right time to get in. And so you end up, seeing a lot of people who might not have thought about getting involved suddenly feeling like there's an opportunity to take advantage of getting into it and then, potentially losing a lot of money in the process. It makes perfect sense to me that the Department of Justice would have a team focused on this because time and time again, we're seeing the examples. We know that cybersecurity, largely a lot of ransomware attacks are built around the foundation of cryptocurrency. There's just too much money there to ignore now.
Yeah, I agree. I think somewhere I've signed up for some service that has probably given me some form of cryptocurrency, so I should note that too. It's just nothing that I really believe is a real thing, and I'm like you in the sense that it just exists and you want to know about it, so you do have some sort of interest in it in that way. I think, ultimately, if these crimes are going to exist, if folks are going to try to make use of these means to scam other people and to sort of cheat people out of their funds and all of that's involved, then I am glad that there's a team that's paying attention to this and is working on trying to undo that. That's the most important thing to me. And so knowing that now the Department of Justice, and I imagine we'll start to see other agencies also pay even more attention to cryptocurrency after this first kind of announcement, regardless of whether that lends legitimacy to something that on the whole I feel like might be very prone to scam. I think that it's important that we are paying attention to it. So I'm glad that that's happening. And I was happy to see this announcement this morning via Bloomberg.
Yeah, and I mean, along the lines of, lending legitimacy to crypto, like I feel like the last couple of years, it's been company after company, major banking company after major banking company saying that, suddenly they're going to start supporting crypto to some degree, or we're opening up interest into it or whatever. So I think there's just a lot of signals right now in the marketplace, in the financial marketplace that say, and investments, investment portfolios. A lot more attention is being paid to do you have crypto as part of your investment portfolio? Not whether you should or shouldn't, but it's a part of that conversation. So again, that really lends to the legitimization of crypto, whether it has earned it or not. Whether it deserves to have it or not. It is, right? And it's just highly speculative. It's total gambling, in my opinion anyways. It's complete gambling. Who the heck knows how that's going to pan out? I guess we'll find out. And it makes perfect sense that there would be a team to manage that. So,
agreed. All right.
Up next, we're going to sing a little Kumbaya for printers. Aren't you looking forward to that? Because aren't printers great? Yeah. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Nureva. Complicated and costly, that has actually been the state of audio conferencing for larger spaces for a very long time, right? Like you always need a team of people to install this system and get everything just right. Choosing a traditional system might entail very difficult design software, a dizzying array of separate microphones, speakers, DSPs, and a whole lot more. Installation, like I said, it requires outside technicians, often highly invasive, very expensive. It could take your room offline for days. The industry was totally primed for the same type of leap in technology that had transformed and simplified other sectors. And might I add, COVID-19 comes along and makes that even more essential. Well, Nureva made that leap when they created revolutionary microphone mist technology. And it's a patented technology. It's just one or two integrated microphone and speaker bars filling a room. That's all. And thousands of virtual microphones as a result. There are no dead zones. Everyone can be heard everywhere in the room. Meeting and class participants can actually just simply talk where they are. They can move naturally in the space and still be heard by remote participants. Other systems have a real big challenge doing that. You kind of have to be locked into a place, locked into the prime spot of the room to be heard well. And thanks to continuous auto calibration, your rooms are instantly and always ready with optimized audio. And you don't need a technician in order to install this. It's actually really easy to install. It's a 30-minute DIY job. That means big savings on time and cost compared to traditional systems. They simplified management as well. There's the Nureva console. That gives IT the power to monitor, to manage, and adjust their systems from anywhere. So you don't need IT to go from room to room, in other words. So it just simplifies everything. Also, the quality is superb. Ask yourself if you want to go with a costly and complicated traditional system, or maybe you want to make the leap to simple and economical Nureva. Learn more at nureva.com. That's Nureva. Nureva.com. Check it out for yourself. You can kind of see they have some videos on the site where it shows someone installing. And I mean, it's like a sound bar. It's really easy to install. So really cool stuff. And we thank Nureva for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right, printers, the technology we love to hate. We have a printer. It's out in our converted garage, which is now my wife's workspace, but and I swear at it every once in a while. It's a standard game that I play. Now there are more reasons to hate them. Cory Doctorow actually wrote a piece for the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation site, EFF.org, and he focuses on all things that suck about consumer printers, but more specifically about label printers, which I'll get into a second. But I probably don't need to remind you all the reasons why actual printers suck, right? Like, it's that upfront investment. It's a large, clunky piece of hardware. Hopefully it lasts a long time. But I feel like my experience with printers is that we buy them and then maybe they last 5-6 years, which I guess is okay longevity, but why can't they last longer than that, And then they're just a landfill, thrown in the landfill, I'm assuming. It's just no good. And it also happens to be kind of like you buy the razor and you buy the blades. You buy the printer, that's a big upfront cost, and then you pay just as much for the ink over time, because you always need ink, so you're buying it forever. And sometimes that ink really sucks for many reasons. Maybe the ink is just poor, and it's spotty or whatever. Maybe the manufacturers have added DRM chips to the ink cartridges. And this has just been kind of an insidious inclusion that, I think I've gotten used to, but just sucks, right? It's essentially, it's a chip on the ink that has a cryptographic key that's built into the printer by the manufacturer. And of course, the key on the chip has to match the key in the printer in order for that printer to actually say, all right, you can use the ink. Even though any manufacturer could make a supported ink cartridge, if they're missing that chip, it's just not going to work. So ultimately, that's a way for the printer manufacturer to get you to pay your money to them instead of anyone else, right? It's unnecessary, but it's something that's built in purely because it gives them an ongoing, almost endless revenue stream for their printer. So you can kind of understand business-wise why they do it, but it just sucks. Well, Cory points out that supply chain issues that we've been talking about a lot have been wreaking havoc on printers because, in some cases, those little DRM chips can't be manufactured. What happens when that happens? Well, your printer doesn't work anymore because you can't buy supported ink anymore because you can't find any ink with the DRM. So that's one aspect. But he really focuses mostly on label printers, and label printers operate a little differently than the printers that I have in my garage. It's a thermal printer. The print head basically heats up, and a special type of paper reacts to that. It's called thermoreactive paper. It turns black when it's heated in a special way. But with label printers, you can't DRM an ink cartridge because one doesn't exist, right? It's just like a heating element. And so label printers have kind of been free and clear of this like DRM hurdle until now. Cory points out the Dymo brand is setting the trend. They are relying on RFID chips to identify their own reams of thermal paper. So instead of DRM on the ink or, that supply, they're DRMing the actual paper that goes in. And, they point out that, hey, we're doing this because you get special features. You get auto sensing of the type of label that you're printing. You get auto counting of the number of labels that are remaining. The features like that, features that honestly could be implemented without the need for an RFID technology. Like, there are many ways to do that. But because this is a special special kind of technology approach for these thermal reams, Dymo can charge $10 to $15 per roll, and that's compared to $2 to $5 per roll, which is the industry standard for papers like for thermal paper like this.
Wow!
And that money goes to Dymo, doesn't go to anyone else. And if you have that label printer, you have no choice. Like, you have to buy that supported paper. And I read this article and I was like, oh, just, you know what grinds my gears is
you know
that
what really
sort of
grinds
thing.
my gears.
So I don't know. What are your thoughts? You've got to hate printers as much as anyone.
I do. And I actually, Leo will sometimes, when he gets questions on the tech guy over the weekend, because those questions come from your average everyday person and tech user. And so he'll get questions relatively regularly about printers. A lot of times, though, they don't even make it to the show, although they are out there. And one of the things that Leo has asked is like, hey, why do you use a printer? Why do you need a printer? What is it that you do that requires a printer? And different folks have different reasons. I use a printer because I like to do crochet and knitting and other different types of craft projects. And for me, it's easy to have a piece of paper where I can check things off as I complete the different parts of the pattern. And so I use a printer relatively regularly. It's fairly old school. I bought it back when I was in college, and have just kept it going for as long as I have. And it does have some level of DRM, but because it's older and doesn't have all of the new stuff that makes it even more complicated, I've just kept it around and it works fine for what I need it for.
Nice.
The idea that a company is not making enough money, or feels like it's not making enough money, or feels like it could make more money by locking you into a specific type of paper is ridiculous. That article, I think you mentioned early on, they calculated the cost of ink to produce versus what people pay for it, which just enraged me. And so a lot of times when you are working in something that you're printing a whole lot of it, then and you only need it to be in black and white, a thermal printer makes sense. And buying that thermal paper from third parties is good. What I like is that life finds a way, and it's very likely that someone will come out with something, probably on one of the websites that Burke frequents, that he'll usually share with me, where you can go and buy specialized parts that people have made for different things to circumvent this. But I shouldn't have to. It's this idea that, like, you made this bed and now you have to lie in it. I don't like it when Internet of Things companies make this is a very famous example. There was, and I won't go into super detail, but essentially there was this company that made a smart home hub for your home. You buy it and it's got all of the different kind of radios and method protocols for communicating with different devices in your home. Then you could use it to communicate with anything in your house that was smart home. Very cool idea. You buy the thing, you set it up, it's good to go. They decided, instead of continuing to honor the fact that you bought this product and you have it now, they decided to add a subscription service to it. And it really upset people, because you can't give someone something and then take it away and ask them and tell them that if they want it back, they need to pay for it now. Like, they already paid for it. They paid for it when they bought it in the first place. If you feel like you can't keep your company going on buying something and then have, like, that is your customer, then you need to start with the subscription service. It needs to be part of the service kicking off. At the very least, you need to grandfather in your current or grandmother in your current set of customers. At the very least, I would go a step further and say that that's just wrong in the first place. Another thing is the Cricut cutter. It's this sort of craft cutting tool that will cut paper and vinyl and all these kinds of things. Originally, you could use the tool that they have to basically make custom cutting jobs. Then they decided to start charging for the software that does that. And people were very upset. They did walk it back to where current customers are grandmothered in. And yes, I'm going to start saying that going forward. But they they weren't going to do that at first. And that's how I feel about these kinds of things is if you've set it up this way in the first place, that's the choice you made, you're stuck with it. You should have started with a subscription, or in this case, charging for the paper if that's what you wanted to do. Or not charging for the paper, but making it so that you have to use this paper if you want to. And that's just how it should be going forward, or else you're going to lose clients to or customers to other companies. So it'll be interesting to see kind of if they end up walking this back. The other example of having supply chain shortages that mean that you can't make the stupid little chip you put inside of the ink cartridge that requires that ink, like that was a delicious story in one way, because it was a bit of schadenfreude we got to experience as these companies no longer could kind of gouge as they wanted to. But and at the same time, it was also hurting their relationships with customers, because customers who had bought into this whole idea that you have to use their ink, they couldn't even buy the ink and use it with their printer. It's foolish. It's upsetting. And I just ultimately feel, again, you make, what is it? You made the bed, you got to lie.
You reap what you sow.
You reap what you sow, and all of the other versions of that same saying.
Yeah. Well, you said the world finds a way, and, someone might create something to get around this. Corey does point out the Digital Millennium Copyright Act would potentially make that a crime for someone to do that, right? To bypass the DRM technology is kind of a big part of what the DMCA is all about. So, but I mean, maybe not, but, something to consider there too. So in order to use your product the way you should have always been able to use it in the first place, you would then have to break the law, based in current standards. And that's not necessary, or, shouldn't be the way that it is. But anyways, Corey did point out that Dyno's the only label printer doing this right now, but that it's possible that others might, hop on board. And yeah, he actually suggests, he's like, if you have one of these printers, just throw it away, like literally throw it away, and buy a new one from not Dyno, because you will pay more in the long term by their model than you would just getting rid of it, cutting your losses, and buying a new one and getting super cheap printer or paper. That there tells you how foolish a decision that it is that Dymo made that choice. Yeah. That right there. If I can save money by throwing this thing away and getting a new one, then what the heck? But I think that they rely on folks just kind of doing, there's a lot of friction to making a change. If you know how to use this current label printer, if you know that it works with your system, if you're worried, one of these days I need to just set up, I'm writing this in my head now. There's a website where this reference I make all the time is going to exist. But it's from my favorite Pixar movie, A Bug's Life. And I know I've brought it up on the show before, but for new listeners, there's a scene at the very beginning of the movie where these ants are walking along with the food that they're supposed to be carrying to the anthill. And a leaf falls from the sky into their path. And the ants freak out. They don't know what to do now, because there's a leaf in their path. They can't walk forward. What do we do? What do we do? We're so used to just doing the same thing over and over again. They have to call out a specialist who looks them all in their eyes and is like, listen, we're going to go around the leaf. We're just going to go around the leaf. Walk with me now. Walk around the leaf. And they have to focus on him. They're freaking out as they just make this very little step around the leaf, and then they're able to carry on in their path, and they're so happy about it. But that, of course, is a very, very heavy example of what this is. But we human beings do not ultimately like change, and having a leaf fall in our path is enough to kind of make us afraid to make that change. So I think that the company is relying on that in a lot of ways, and it does work for them. But you just wish that you could sort of push that idea out there that he has of look, get rid of it, get a different one. You're going to save money in the long run. I want to tell everyone out there who has a Dymo printer, just make this change. And then it would hurt, and then the company wouldn't do it. And then maybe other companies would follow through. Right. There. Not to be a revolutionary or anything, but goodness. Viva la label maker!
There it is. Viva la label maker. Please.
I think we have a title. All right. Well, we've reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. We do this show every Thursday. You can subscribe. All the information that you need actually to subscribe is just go to twit.tv/TNW. All the podcatchers are there. You can watch or listen on the site if you choose to. Most people probably don't do that, but I would suggest subscribing there or on YouTube, and then it's delivered to you automatically. And by the way, don't forget, we are doing the 2022 Twit survey. It's twit.tv/survey 22. That makes a lot of sense. It's live. It's ready for your input on what you like about, what we're doing, who you are, any of these questions that you want to answer. And by the way, you do not have to answer anything you don't want to answer, but it's all laid out there. It just gives us a little bit of insight into who you are so that we can serve you better, so that we can give you content and information and shows that you actually want to watch and listen to. So twit.tv/survey 22. I think we only have this going for another couple of weeks, and we would love to hear what you have to say. So please do that. We appreciate it.
If you want to get all of our shows ad-free, there's a way for you to do that. Just check out Club Twit, $7 a month. It's all the audio without the ads at twit.tv/clubtwit. Along with all of those shows ad-free, you'll also get access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else. That includes AMAs with some awesome folks. Docta is coming up. Got Georgia Dow, Mary Jo Foley. We've had quite a few people. Steve Gibson and Ant Pruitt is adding more folks all the time. You also get access to the members-only Discord server. If you're going, what the heck is a Discord server? Don't worry. If you ever use Microsoft Teams or Slack or one of those communication apps, then you'll be familiar. It's a lot like that. You get to go in there and chat with your fellow Club Twit members, but also those of us here at Twit. If that sounds good to you, $7 a month, twit.tv/clubtwit. We also heard that some folks wanted to subscribe to their favorite shows directly, and there is a way to do that as well in Apple Podcasts. You just type in Tech News Weekly. You find the audio version of the show. You'll see a button you can tap to subscribe for $2.99 a month. Doing so gets you the ad-free version of the audio feed right there in your Apple Podcasts app. So both of those are a great way to support us. We very much appreciate it. It makes things happen that we otherwise would not be able to do. And hopefully those goodies are exactly what you're looking for. If you want to tweet at me or follow me online, you can follow me at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or head to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. Within the next couple of weeks, I will be returning to the studio on Saturdays to host The Tech Guy with Leo Laporte, which is the radio show where we answer questions from real people all over the U.S. and in some cases around the world. And then on Tuesdays, I do iOS Today with Rosemary Orchard, a show where we talk all things iOS, tvOS, watchOS. It's all the OSs that Apple has on offer. And we like to tell you about apps and services you should check out and answer your questions about those platforms. Jason Howell, what about you?
I'm just at Jason Howell on Twitter. And yes, all about Android, twit.tv/AAA. Next week, I'm going to return to the studio. So I'm going to start doing my shows back in the studio. The mask mandates have kind of lifted in the area, and I'm feeling comfortable with that. So I'll be in studio for All About Android next week. For Tech News Weekly, I'll be there. And looking forward to it. Looking forward to not sitting in this corner of my bedroom for a little while until the next time that I have to again. Crossing my fingers. That doesn't happen. Big thanks to John Ashley. Big thanks to Burke for doing all the work behind the scenes to prep the show and make it happen. And huge thanks to you for watching and listening each and every week. We appreciate you. And we'll see you next time on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Did you spend a lot of money on your brand new smartphone, and then you look at the pictures on Facebook and Instagram and you're like, what in the world happened to that photo? Yes. You have. I know. It happens to all of us. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands On Photography, where I'm going to walk you through simple tips and tricks that are going to help make you get the most out of your smartphone camera or your DSLR or mirrorless, whatever you have. And those shots are going to look so much better. I promise you. So make sure you're tuning in to twit.tv/hop for Hands On Photography to find out more.